Hi, and welcome to our series of online webinars. This morning we are looking at what are incompatible substances. My name is Chrissy and I am the Consultant Coordinator here at ChemSafety. Dwayne Bennett is presenting our webinar today. Both Dwayne and I have been with ChemSafety since 2013. Over that time, Dwayne has become the main presenter of the Certified Handler and Chemical Awareness courses, and he specialises in customising training. He is approved by WorkSafe New Zealand as a compliance certifier for certified handlers and has a Bachelor of Science majoring in chemistry from Canterbury University. There is a Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen where you can post questions. If you'd like one of the questions already posted, you can click on the upvote button. The more voting it gets, the higher up the list it goes, and the more likely it is to be answered during the session. Please don't use the chat function for asking questions, as this can sometimes get missed. And any unanswered questions will be added to the follow-up email you will receive. That will also include a link to the recording of today's session. I will now hand you over to Dwayne.
Excellent, Chrissy. Thank you very much for the warm introduction. It was very warming indeed. So yes, as Chrissy was saying, this is a series of what you'd call webinars and things. So this is the fourth webinar that we'll be undertaking today. Don't forget to check out our other webinars that we've undertaken. It can be very important and very useful as well for some of the information that we're trying to put across today and in previous and in future webinars for that matter. So what we'll do, we'll get into it, and I'll just bring up our share the screen, bring up the course, and here we go. Right, let's get started. So I guess what we should do is we'll start with just sort of asking the basic question of what an incompatible substance is. So what are incompatible substances? So these are substances that can have undesired, adverse, uninspected effects if mixed together. Okay, so that's basically what it is by definition. So, I mean, what would happen if you were to mix incompatible substances? It's always a question I pose toward the start of the chemical awareness courses that I take, and almost always we get the same answer, and that is that yes, boom, fire, all sorts of things. So reactions of incompatible substances. So this can include the release of heat, fumes, gases, toxic fumes, toxic gases. Fire where there's not normally a fire, and also explosive-like reactions like we did see on that particular slide just then. So with incompatibilities, there's specific substances that react with each other, classes that the regulations deem are incompatible with each other. So this is what we're able to get this information from these regulations, which we'll look at in slides to come. So frequently asked questions. How do I know which hazardous substances are incompatible with each other? And where do I find this information? Okay, so we'll take you through some of these, we'll answer these questions basically. And then the other question there is, what do I need to do about my incompatible substances? So in other words, how do I go about storing them? And when it comes to storage and separation distances and things like that, there will be another separate webinar for that will contain those details at a later date. So I guess first and foremost, a very important place that we're able to find the information regarding our incompatible substances is either sections 7 or section 10 of the safety data sheet. They contain information for some of your incompatibilities for your substances. So not just the chemicals or the classes that they're incompatible with, but also some of the materials. So if you need to brush up on your safety data sheet skills there, do view webinar number 2 that we did for safety data sheets. If you need the link, do contact us, get in contact with us, and we'll send the link through to you so you can just brush up on your safety data sheet skills. So here's an example, an excerpt from one of the safety data sheets that we looked at. And it's quite interesting. You'll see there section 10, stability reactivity, and that little part there that says incompatible materials. So yes, this particular substance, it was a flammable gas. Yes, we cover oxidizing agents. It also mentions acids. It mentions heat and ignition sources, which makes sense. It also mentions rubber flexible hoses. Remember, this is just an example of what you may see in Section 10 or Section 7 of your safety data sheet with regards to your incompatible substances. Also, we will find the bulk of that information from the regulations. So they have them in all separate tables. This one here is Schedule 15, but you'll find them throughout the regulations. This particular schedule here is mainly for corrosives and toxins, but you'll have them for class 2, 3, and 4, and 5 substances also. You'll also find information with regards to your incompatible substances, of course, in our EPA notices. So it's the Hazardous Substance Hazardous Property Control Notice 2017, Schedule 4. You will find a good list chart. So this wee chart here is just an example. It basically goes through all of the examples or all of the classes of substances. And remember, if you need brushing up on what HSNO classifications or hazard classes are, check out our first webinar. Basically, everything that we'll be covering today, we will be talking about the classifications of those hazardous substances. So very important for you to brush up on your HSNO classification knowledge also. Okay. So what about them? So substance, substance is not in contact with any substance or material which it is incompatible with, and also containers of incompatible substances need to be stored separately. So in some cases, for higher quantities, there are specified separations by firewalls or distances. And again, as I mentioned, this is something that we will go over in later webinars with regards to site and storage. So again, just a quick brush up, our hazard classes. We'll be using this format to outline what our incompatible substances are. So yes, again, if you need a wee refresher, check out free webinar number 1, and it is all to do with HSNO classifications. So let's get into it. Which hazardous substances are incompatible? So at ChemSafety, we are able to provide these charts that allow you to understand which substances are incompatible with others. They have been directly extracted from the regulations, so they are on board with our health and safety at work legislation also. What you'll find as well is some of these charts may be familiar to you if you have had any kind of location compliance certification reporting done on your site. Also very important is if you've attended the previous Keeping Track of Your Hazardous Substances webinar, you would have noticed that the calculator will also tell you what your substances are incompatible with. So that was the previous webinar undertaken by my colleague Janet there. Okay, moving right along. So let's have a look at the incompatibles as per classification, as per regulations. So as it states here, we have things that are our flammable gases, our 2.1.1 flammable gases, and you can see there that they are incompatible with explosive material, flammable aerosols, flammable liquids, flammable solids, and also oxidizers. Now do remember that if you look at the next slide there, do remember to check out other specific incompatibilities on your safety data sheet. Good example of some incompatibles with regards to our flammable gases there is basically the mixture of our acetylene gas with oxygen gas. Now this is a common practice. This is commonly known as oxyacetylene welding or metal cutting. And what happens there is it actually uses the incompatibility of the two substances in a controlled situation to do work for us. So in other words, we're able to control its incompatibility and get it to make that incredibly hot flame where we're able to cut through metal with it. So for that reason, yes, indeed, the acetylene and the oxygen gas is incompatible. However, under controlled situations, we can use their incompatibilities to do work. Our flammable aerosols as well. So do be aware that they are also incompatible with the flammable gases. There are a few interesting exceptions they make for flammable aerosols with regards to storage. We will save that for the site and storage webinar that will be coming up shortly. So again, as you can see there, they are the particular classes they're incompatible with, similar to what you've just seen. However, the 2.1.2 and the 2.1.1 have been swapped around. So here we go. This is an important one. Most industry do have flammable liquids. So it's important just to read this chart and just to understand that they are indeed incompatible with the following classes, as you can see there. That's the explosives, the flammable gases and aerosols, the liquid desensitized explosives, the flammable solids, and the oxidizers. And there are many examples of what could happen when you combine these incompatible substances together. There is one known as an example can be fertilizers, such as ammonium nitrate type fertilizers, which are known to be oxidizers. And if they are mixed with any type of fuel, including petrol or diesel, but petrol, if they mix together, of course, it does cause that explosive effect. So yeah, do be aware of your incompatibles there. Also, if you were to check your safety data sheets for some of these flammable liquids, you may find that it will also include corrosive substances. It's not outlined in the legislation or in the EPA notices, but do be aware that that may also be an incompatibility. So the way to check that is through looking at section 7 and section 10 of your safety data sheets. So next one across. Our flammable solids. So these ones are quite interesting. I mean, you've got your 4.1.1, your flammable solids, solids that are readily combustible. And as you can see there, that they are incompatible with explosives, with the flammable gases, their own flammable solids also, and oxidizers. They can also be incompatible with themselves. A great example of the 4.1.1 reactivity there is the fact that if it is, I mean, if you think about safety matches and the ingredients in a match head, and also the ingredient that's actually put on the side of those matchboxes. So you'll find that the match head contains the oxidizer, which is incompatible. So if that's struck against the actual flammable solid itself, known as red phosphorus, then the match will ignite. Okay, so great example there. Other types of 4.1.2 and 4.1.3, however, do refer back to our first webinar for details on those types of flammable solids. 4.2, so these are substances that are spontaneously combustible. And there are many examples. We've got the example of white phosphorus, magnesium powder, and things such as soybean meal as well. As you can see there, they are incompatible with the following substances. And it's interesting to note there that we have a couple of examples. I mean, of course, you have some spectacular examples of the combination of white phosphorus just with oxygen and how explosive that can actually be. And then other kind of examples are things like linseed that is sort of self-reacting and can spontaneously combust. So you can see there that they're incompatible with those particular classes there. So if we have a look at the next one there, that's our flammable solid that is dangerous when wet. Okay. So as the name suggests, these types of substances are incompatible with water as well as those particular substances right there. And interestingly enough, you'll find that there are many examples of these dangerous when wet flammable solids. An interesting one is the calcium carbide reaction with water. And this is what was used to light lamps for miners back in earlier days there. And what it did is it would react with the calcium carbide and it would evolve acetylene gas, which we all know is a flammable gas. So indeed, calcium carbide is a perfect example of an incompatible substance that's incompatible with the water. Other examples can be zinc metal or zinc ashes. When that's combined with acid, again, will evolve hydrogen gas, which is a highly flammable gas, incompatible, of course. Now that brings us to our class 5 oxidizing substances. Okay, so this looks like it is quite involved. And this is due to the chemical makeup of these particular substances. These substances contain oxygen or a substance that behaves like oxygen. In other words, it can intensify a fire. There can be metal halides and things like that, but it can intensify a fire. And it's interesting just to see what they're incompatible with. As you can see there, again, most of those classes, including explosives, gases and aerosols, flammable liquids, flammable solids, the organic peroxides, and now we're seeing that it's also incompatible with class 6.1A, B, and C toxic substances, and also incompatible with corrosives. It is also incompatible with organic matter or carbon-containing material in a form that will combust with the class 5 substance. It's also incompatible with zinc or magnesium in any form or any powdered metal. Any substance or material that will combust with air or will combust with or catalyze the decomposition of class 5.1 substances, okay? So they are what the oxidizing substances are incompatible with. Now, sometimes these reactions with the incompatible, say for instance, the mixture of hydrogen peroxide or an oxidizing substance with, say, something that's organic, you're not going to get the hugely spectacular results. Well, the result may be, but the reaction won't be hugely spectacular. It may take a wee while for it to happen. It could happen overnight, or it could happen over a few days. And what that is that it slowly builds up. The reaction slowly builds, till eventually it'll start smoldering and then eventually cause heat enough to cause some sort of flame. That is the main reason why you must not use sawdust in the case of a spill containing an oxidizing substance. Okay, so sawdust is a big no-no for your oxidizing substances. There are many examples of oxidizing substances reacting with others, and we've already seen them when we looked at how an oxidizer will react with a flammable liquid, how it will react with flammable gases. So, so yes, indeed, an interesting class, and most definitely full of examples. So the other part of the oxidizing substances are our organic peroxides. So similar to our oxidizing substance, it contains oxygen or something similar, or behave similar to oxygen within its chemical makeup. However, it also contains its own fuel. It also contains its own organic side of things. So with an organic peroxide, as you can imagine, and if you were to refer back to our very first webinar, you'll find that they can be quite difficult to deal with in case of an emergency, So, I mean, a good example there is the example here of the dichlorobenzoyl peroxide is known to react quite violently with metallic powders. So as you can see there, that is part of its incompatibility, zinc, magnesium in any form, or powdered metals. And also any substance that, or material that will combust with air or will combust or catalyze the decomposition of a class 2, 5.2 substance. So you can see that it's also compatible with all those other classes, class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, class 5.1, class 6.1 A, B, and C, and also class 8 corrosive substances. So very nasty. So, I mean, if you do have these types of substances on site, do give us a call here at ChemSafety, do contact us, and we'll be able to provide you with guidance. So as you can see there, the reason for that, as you can see, there are quite a lot of incompatibilities. So potentially there can be a few adverse effects that can occur with the storage of your oxidizing substances and your organic peroxides. Okay, so we're moving along now to toxic substances. So those first classes, class 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5s, kind of known as our explosive or our flammable and oxidizing materials. So those are things that are that have sort of immediate effects, as well as the toxics here. So if we just look at the toxics, as you can see there, our toxics 6.1 A, Bs, and Cs are incompatible with the oxidizers, like we saw in the previous slide, and also incompatible with explosives. So no storing your toxics with your fireworks, of course. Okay, and furthermore, leading on from that, if we get specific about our toxic substances and we talk about our toxic cyanides, they have the same incompatibilities that have already been mentioned, so incompatible with class 1 and 5s, but are also incompatible with class 8.2 corrosive acids. And yes, some very nasty examples of what can occur if you were to mix sodium cyanide with an acid, they basically decompose on contact with acid and will produce highly toxic hydrogen cyanide gas. So very important just to be aware of that. If your company or if your industry does undertake work that contains sodium cyanide, just to ensure to have it separate from your corrosive acids. Okay. So we have here now our corrosive substances. Good examples there, hydrochloric acid, which are the acids, of course, on one side of the pH scale, and sodium hydroxide, which is on the other side of the pH scale. Okay, goes from 1 to 14. If you're sort of trying to figure out what is meant by corrosive substances and pH and all that, do check out our first webinar. We go through corrosive substances in some detail. So these are the incompatibles there. So we've got our 8.2 A and B corrosive substances. So 8.2, remember, being corrosive to skin corrosives. They are incompatible with our explosives. Our class 4.3s, do remember that it was mentioned previously in the flammable solid 4.3 slide. It's also incompatible with our oxidizers, as we mentioned previously also. Now, if we split our corrosives into acids and alkali, so hydrochloric acid being the acid and sodium hydroxide being the alkali, another thing to note, just remember, if you see on your safety data sheet where it says incompatible with alkalis, bases, and things like that, just remember that an alkali is a base, or if it says something about caustic, alkali and base are pretty much are all in a similar vein there. They're all alkalis. Okay, so with our corrosive acids, they're incompatible with the classes that have been mentioned above there on that chart, but they are also incompatible with the toxic cyanides, as mentioned in the previous slide, and they are incompatible with the corrosive alkalis. Okay, the corrosive alkalis that are 8.2A and 8.2B, so must not be stored together. And vice versa, if you look at what incompatibilities there are with 8.2 alkalis, it is, of course, the above classes, and it also includes the corrosive acids also. Okay, so just be aware of that. Some great examples there of even just acid-base titration for the chemists. If you've ever undertaken that, you'll also always feel that heat given off when these the acid and the base do mix. High concentrations or dangerous concentrations that can also give off gases and fumes. Not to mention the fact that, of course, as mentioned earlier, the mixture of the 4.3 flammable solid with the hydrochloric acid, yes, will create hydrogen amongst other things, and which is highly flammable and highly dangerous. And then finally, if we look at our ecotoxic substances, a perfect example of that is our glyphosate, our Roundup. And as you can see there, the excerpt that we have is from the EPA notices. So it's not mentioned in the hazardous substances regs. However, we do have, well, in the tables that is, however, we do have reference to it in the EPA notice there, which is fantastic. And it is incompatible with your class 1 and class 5 substances. All right, so moving along. So what do you do with your incompatible substances? So what is it that you do with them? I mean, it could be the fact that you're an oxyacetylene welder. So yes, indeed, you're using them together to do the work that is required to cut through the metal, to weld the metal parts and things. So let's just check it out. So how can you manage your incompatible substances? So firstly, of course, you need to identify your incompatibles, which we've just gone through. We've basically outlined how to identify them and where to go to find out or get the information about the incompatible substances so we can identify what they're incompatible with. Also to segregate, so you need to have them separately stored, held in separate packages, so in separate stores or in separate bins, and also there regarding storage cabinets. So larger quantities of incompatible substances may require greater distance, as we mentioned in the previous slide. And with regards to separation distance, stay tuned to watch our webinar on site and storage regarding them. So I'm not too sure if that'll be the next one or the one after that, but it will have information about separation distances and how to safely store and manage your incompatible substances there. So if there are any questions, yes, do feel free to drop us a line, use the Q&A tab there. And if not, if we go through here, I'd just like to thank you for coming and attending our webinar. These just a few of the things that we provide at Chem Safety with regards to safe management of hazardous substances there. And so yeah, thank you very much. That's our website there. And if you need to contact us, that's our phone details and our email address. So thank you for that. And you've been a wonderful audience. So hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar. I'm Dwayne, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.